This is part 4 of the reading of Jim and Jamie Dutcher's The Wisdom of Wolves. We're now on to chapter 2, I believe. Chapter 3, rather. Lead with kindness. Back to Jim's perspective writing here. The aspen trees were surrendering after their brief moment of autumn brilliance. Their spade-shaped leaves had faded to dull yellow and brown and began to shake loose with each gentle puff of wind. One by one, ravens gathered in the barest branches. The birds engaged in a lively conversation, chatting back and forth in a musical gurgle that always sounded to me like a strange mechanical dribbling of water. They seemed to enjoy pausing to hear the sound bounce back to them from the mountain walls. The bird swooped down to join 3 others, picking at the same scattered bones and pieces of hide, the signs of a wolf feast completed. The wolves of the Sawtooth Pack paid the ravens no mind. They had spent the last 3 years working through the carcass of a 600-pound bull elk, and were enjoying the resulting food stupor, resting at the edge of the forest on a crisp October afternoon. During our years at wolf camp, we did our best to recreate the way wolves live in the wild, mimicking the success or failure of a hunt, bringing in road-killed elk and deer at irregular intervals. After such a big meal, they wouldn't need to eat again for several days. It was a picture of pure contentment. Matomo and Amani basked in a patch of sunshine, snarling and growling in mock battle, while Hats and Waiken played tug-of-war with a leftover piece of elk hide. Matsi and Lakota snoozed side by side, Chumuk always the loner, gnawed on the end of an antler a few yards away. Kamatz sat and calmly watched his pack. Suddenly, he lifted his head to full attention and his body became tense. The forest was quiet save for the occasional croaking of ravens, but his ears pivoted forward and he turned to point his nose toward something distant and unseen. With sudden purpose he rose to his feet and trotted away with that cool, determined gait that wolves have. Matomo and Amani lifted their heads to watch him go, and then settled back down. They knew Kamatz, whatever it was, he had it covered. 15 minutes later he reappeared at the same confident trot, rejoined with the others, and lay back down. It must have been a false alarm, possibly an elk moving through the nearby forest, or the distant falling of a long dead tree. His body language told all that there was no cause for concern. His body told all that there was no cause for alarm. Whatever was going on, he dealt with it. That's just who he was. For a better part of 9 years, Kamatz was the undisputed leader of the Sawtooth Pack. Under his protection, the pack thrived. From a filmmaker's perspective, he was beautiful to behold. His looks were classic, gray with a charcoal saddle, a dark face mask above a light muzzle. He wasn't the biggest wolf in the pack, but the way he stood often made him appear so. He held his head and his tail high and kept his ears up and alert. When he moved, it was with an unhurried confidence and certainty. His eyes were his most expressive feature. They were light amber, almost yellow, and in an instant they could flash from serious to mischievous, too concentrated to disarmingly sweet. The joys and the burdens of his role seemed to play across his face constantly, making him one of the most engaging wolves to film, photograph, or just watch. In looks, in bearing, and in behavior, he was the he was the embodiment of an alpha wolf. We've noticed lately that the word alpha, quote unquote, is falling out of favor among some biologists. They would rather use the dry observational term breeding adult, quote unquote. Unfortunately, the word alpha, quote unquote, has also come to be used to describe aggressive, hyper-competitive human males, which further conveys the wrong impression. Yes, alphas are the breeding male and female, but they are so much more than the dominant individuals of the pack. After spending years in Kamat's company, we have concluded that being an alpha has almost nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with responsibility. There's the key. Alphas are driven from within to shoulder the well-being of the entire pack. They patrol the boundaries of their territory looking for danger. They are keepers of pack knowledge, where to find prey and how best to hunt it. Alphas are assured, alert, and compassionate. A true alpha is a leader in the very best sense. Kamatz was born in the spring of 1991. He and his littermates were the first pups we raised by hand to create the foundation of the Sawtooth Pack. From my very first experiences with Kamatz as a pup, I could tell he was special. Some wolf pups are playful and submissive, some are nervous and shy, but Kamatz was bold and curious from the start. When they were 2 weeks old, we introduced these three pups to a fenced-off area outside where they could get used to the natural world. At first they huddled close together and timidly sniffed the grass, but after just a few seconds, little Kamatz bounded forward, leaving his siblings behind to inspect every corner of his new surroundings. The social structure of a wolf pack is hierarchical, and pups develop their own pup hierarchy, quote unquote, right from the beginning. It was amazing to witness the difference between Kamatz and his brother and sister, even at this early age. When we had to separate them from bottle feeding, Lakota and Mataki would become quite anxious at being apart from their siblings. Then, when they were reunited with the group, there would follow a period of squabbling, almost as though they had to reestablish their hierarchy all over again. Kamatz, on the other hand, took being alone as just another experience. When he rejoined his littermates, he resumed his place calmly, as though he had never been gone. As Kamatz grew to adulthood, he simply assumed the role of alpha male as though it had always been his. He never fought another wolf for the position. He never dominated another wolf with excessive force or intimidation. He simply took charge. When he when we introduced the pups to when we introduced the pups Matsi, Matomo, and Amani the following year, they accepted him as their leader without any hesitation. It's almost as if they have like an extrasensory perception or something. I don't know how to explain it. They just accepted him as leader without any hesitation. There's just a knowing. One of the things that Jamie and I enjoyed most during our years with the pack was to wake before dawn and watch from our camp as the wolves said good morning to their fellow pack mates. They didn't sleep solid hours like we did. Each wolf had a few favorite places to sleep, and they'd move about during the night. Still, to our amazement, each wolf began the day paying respects to Kamatz and each of its own and each in its own unique way. Matsi was the pack's beta wolf, second only to Comets in rank. He possessed a similar confidence, but he was mild-mannered and content to let someone else lead. When he greeted Comets, Matsi would uh, often hold his head slightly lower than the alphas and stand beside him like a loyal lieutenant. Lakota, the lowest wolf in the hierarchy, would practically belly crawl toward his brother. He'd lick Comet's muzzle the way a pup begs for food, whining softly. There was no fear in this ritual. It seemed to be a way of showing the leader respect. For his part, Comets's demeanor was not one of severity, but one of care and concern. He was making sure all were present and accounted for and everyone was well. Above all, the wolves were expressing the bond that each felt for the other, and all recognized Comets as the center of their universe. They greeted each other, touched noses, and pressed shoulder to shoulder in gestures of camaraderie with Comets and as the hub. As the protector of the pack, Comets was responsible for keeping order. He was usually a calm, cool presence, but there was no getting around the fact that he was also the head of the hierarchy. From time to time, he had to assert himself and make that clear, most often when a deer or elk carcass was present. I'll never forget watching him over a meal when he was only about a year old. We'd found a small deer that had been killed on the highway and brought it to feed the pack. There wasn't a whole lot to go around. As Comets stationed himself over the kill, his brother Lakota approached timidly, hoping to grab a mouthful. At first, Comets simply raised his eyes and stared at his brother, uttering a long, low growl. Lakota shrunk lower, trying to look as insignificant as possible, but he couldn't help stretching his neck forward toward the deer, just trying to get that one bite. Comets' face transformed. His lips curled upward to expose a mouthful of teeth, and his ears shot out to the side like horns. He let out an He let out an assertive growl and lunged. Lakota leaped backward with a yelp and flipped over in submission. The episode was surprising in its sudden ferocity, but I came to learn that this is the language of wolves. It was not Comets' intention to keep Lakota from eating entirely, just to make him back off for a bit and respect the pack's social hierarchy. He made his point without ever making contact. By the time Lakota crept forward, toward the kill once more, Comets had settled, and he allowed his brother to eat. Comets' leadership was firm and was firm at times, but we never saw him treat any wolf viciously or harm any member of his pack. This was not always true of other wolves. Amani, despite showing endless patience with young pups, could be a bully toward other adults, especially Lakota. I suspect it was because he was afraid he might drop in rank if he didn't continuously prove his strength. Comets, in contrast, never felt the need to behave this way. His authority was secure. A warning growl and a flash of teeth were sometimes necessary to keep everyone in line, but he almost never took it further. I believe that he earned the pack's respect in a way that a more aggressive wolf would not. By the time the three pups, Chemek, Waikin, and Wahats, had made it through their first summer, Comets began to treat them with a slightly firmer hand. For their first 4 months of life, he had guaranteed them a place at every carcass and made sure they ate they ate their full. Around September, though, when the pups were adolescents, he changed his tune. He began challenging them and making them assert themselves for the right to eat. I believe he was doing some character building because he focused on timid Chumuk especially. Again, I apologize for any mispronunciations of these names. Um, I haven't. This is my first time reading this book or in any contact with this material. Before they're a year old, young wolves must be ready to travel with the pack, making their way through deep snow and participating in the hunt when they can. I think Kamatz was letting the growing pups know that childhood was over and it was time to toughen up. Kamatz was a marvelous leader, but he was not the Sawtooth Pack's only alpha. A wolf pack actually has two alphas and two parallel hierarchies, one for males and one for females. In the final years of the project, Chemik emerged as the Sawtooth Pack's alpha female. Although Kamatz was the very embodiment of a natural leader, Chemik was anything but. She was high-strung and could be aggressive when she felt insecure. She was, however, one of only two females in the pack, and her counterpart, Waiken, was easygoing and not at all prone to fighting. When the two were still immature, Jamie and I speculated that Waiken's even temperament would make her the better alpha, but biology had other plans. Chemuk came to estrus, her first period before sexual receptivity, before Waiken, and Comets took notice at once. By the time Waiken caught up, Comets and Chemuk had already mated, securing Comets' position. I mean Chemuk, not Kamek. From that point forward, she became something of a tyrant, going as far as biting Waiken and Lakota from time to time. As much as Comets showed me what a leader was, Chemuk sometimes showed me what a leader wasn't. When I think of Chemuk, I I'm reminded of a story from Yellowstone's famous Druid Peak Pack and a wolf who is finally remembered as the Cinderella wolf. Cinderella, or 42, as her radio caller officially identified her, was not a mild-mannered wolf, subordinate to her sister, number 40. Unfortunately, that alpha female number 40 reminds us of Chemuk, not the even-tempered Cinderella. Wolf number 40 was a textbook tyrant who maintained her status through a steady outpouring of aggression toward the pack's other females. After decades without wolves, Yellowstone was flush with an overabundance of elk. Under such favorable conditions, a wolf pack may allow multiple members to breed. In 1999, the Druid Pack's alpha male side pups with both 40 and 42 Cinderella. This seemed to push 40, the alpha female, over the edge, and Cinderella found herself the target of her sister's wrath more than ever. At every opportunity, 40 attacked Cinderella and attempted to drive her out of the pack. She may have even killed Cinderella's first litter, though no one can say for sure. Wolves generally cooperate in all aspects of family life, but the following year, when Cinderella again mated with the alpha male, she was so concerned about her pups' safety that she dug a den far from her sisters and kept her young ones out of sight. Then, one day, 40 came calling. The aggressive alpha attacked her sister, as always, and threatened her pups. At last, Cinderella turned and stood her ground. At, at this point, the rivalry between the two females could have gone either way, but something truly amazing happened. The other females in the pack rose up and rallied around Cinderella. Together, they literally staged a coup, killing the tyrant and elevating a new leader. one they knew would be even-tempered and kind. From then on, 42, the Cinderella Wolf, ruled benevolently as the Druid Peak Pack's alpha female. Fortunately, as Chumuk aged and settled in as the Sawtooth Pack's female leader, she became more secure and her aggression subsided. She was never to be the strong leader that Kamatz was, but at least she became a reliable member of the pack. Lately, biologists have been trying to determine whether the alpha male or female is the ultimate leader of the pack, quote unquote. Doug Smith, the head of the Yellowstone Wolf Restoration Project, has spent thousands of hours observing the park's wolves, and even he is unable to give a definitive answer to this question. He did share some stories with us, though. It's quite common, he says, to see an alpha male stand up and stretch, looking like he's ready to venture off somewhere, and no other members of his pack pay much heed. On the other hand, every often when the alpha female stands up, every other wolf will come to attention as if to say, "Oh, we're doing something now," quote unquote. It doesn't happen every time, Doug says, but his observations suggest that wolves often appear more keyed into the alpha female's leadership than to the alpha males. It could be that in most successful packs that alpha male and female rule together, dividing their duties based on their individual talents. Big males are good at guarding territory and protecting the pack. On the hunt, the alpha male is often the one to deliver the finishing blow to prey. On the other hand, females are usually smaller and faster on their feet. They can often be seen initiating the hunt and testing a prey animal to see if it's worth pursuing. Jamie and I noticed another sign of the alpha female's elevated status. When Chumuk dug her den, no other wolf, not even Kamatz, entered it. That was her domain and hers alone. Because a wolf pack is above all else a family, and raising healthy pups is the pack's primary mission, it's not surprising that the mother of the pups would play the key role. Still, I can say without question that in the Sawtooth Pack, Comets was the one in charge. He alone patrolled their territory and kept an eye out for danger. When they gathered for a pack rally, a spirited display of pack solidarity, the other wolves rallied around him. When they howled, Comets led in their song. Whether the male or female or both, the alpha is the center of gravity that holds the pack together. After many years leading her pack, the Cinderella wolf was found dead near an elk carcass at the edge of her territory. A few months later, her mate, a grizzled male called 21, left the pack and walked alone to a ridge, laid down under a tree, and died peacefully. It was a momentous time, reshaping the world of the Yellowstone wolves. Imagine the sun abruptly vanishing and the planets with no force to hold them in orbit, spinning off into the void. For the remainder of the Druid Peak pack, that's how it probably felt. Some splintered off on their own to seek out new territory. A small pack under a new alpha pair tried to rebuild on the old territory, but the pack never regained its former power. By 2010, the Druid Peak pack had ceased to be. Wolf packs aren't made to last forever. During their long reign, Cinderella and her mate 21 likely raised more offspring than any other wolf pair in Yellowstone. Their blood runs in many of the wolves who lead packs today throughout the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So although it is sad to think of the passing of these two well-known wolves in Yellowstone, it is worth remembering that they were victorious. The greater tragedy is that many great alpha wolves out there today do not get the chance to have that success. We know from our own human experience that stories of heroism are often tragic tales. the courage, compassion, and sacrifice that make a human or a wolf a great leader often sow the seeds of their downfall. Consider these facts. In Alaska, trappers run their lines right along the boundaries of Denali National Park and Preserve, taking advantage if any wolf steps across the invisible border. In Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks, wolf hunters may even be using radio telemetry to track the movements of radio-collared park wolves. If any wolf leaves the protected area and in the pursuit of migrating elk, they eventually do. Hunters are already lined up and waiting. In the Idaho wilderness, there is no safe zone for wolves, and hunting them recreationally is encouraged. In 2014, Idaho's Department of Fish and Game sold 43,300 wolf hunting tags or permits. That year, there were a mere 650 wolves in Idaho, and in several regions in Idaho today, including the federally protected wilderness areas, management plans in place are designed to reduce any already tiny populations of wolves by as much as 40 to 60%. In such a hostile environment, what would have befallen a leader such as Comets? He was always the one to investigate danger, and he would never have hesitated to put himself between a threat and his pack. It's what a great leader it's what great leaders do. So when hunters are combing the wilderness looking for wolves, which ones are they going to see and shoot? Every time we read a headline about wolves getting shot, we have to come to expect that at least one of an alpha male pair was among the victims. Protecting the pack is the alpha's solemn duty, and may likely be his or her doom. When an alpha is killed, the pack goes into shock and grief. We're talking about young and mid-ranking wolves literally losing their mother or father. Wolves suffer this emotional loss intensely. The pack has just lost experience, knowledge, its gravitational center. Just as we saw when the Druid Peak pack lost its alphas, the surviving wolves often scatter. A fragmented and traumatized pack of 2 or 3 wolves without an alpha will have a much more difficult time bringing down an adult elk or even defending their kill from bears or other predators. Ranchers may even suffer from the impact, for a smaller pack of less experienced wolves may go after easier prey, such as livestock. A large pack with strong leaders is far more predictable. The alphas maintain their territories so they can hunt on familiar ground. Once alpha females establish a safe den site, they'll often return to it year after year and even pass it on to the next generation. Experienced alpha wolves know the danger that humans present. Knowledgeable alphas will pick a safe spot to hunt and raise young that minimizes conflict with rival packs and with humans. And once they've taken possession of that locale, they will hold on to it. When they when we talk to policymakers, we often stress these practical issues because of their repercussions through the landscape that wolves share with humans. It is easy to discuss the importance of an alpha as the one that brings experience, strength, and stability to a pack. Comets certainly had those attributes, but for Jamie, and me, there was something more difficult to define. Something in the alpha's mere presence. I may have been the human in charge of the Sawtooth Wolf project, responsible for all logistical and practical matters, but I looked upon Comets as the true leader and spirit of the pack and the project. By the time our Wolf Camp project reached its halfway point, the anti-wolf community was making it far more difficult and disturbing than I had ever imagined it could. One autumn day in the project's it went out again. Let's restart. Um, where was I? The anti-wolf community was making it far more difficult and disturbing than I had ever imagined it could. One autumn day in the project's fourth year, I felt my confidence falter. I had just received a series of disappointing messages from the authorities holding our land use permits. They were under pressure to cancel my certifications, and if that happened, the wolves would have to go. We were still searching for a permanent home for the pack, and the consequences for an eviction were unthinkable. Even more concerning were letters that had begun to appear in our mailbox, anonymous threats to, quote, get rid of those wolves or we will, end quote. Someone posted signs near our camp warning us to be gone or, quote, wind up in the Custer County Jail, end quote. Even a former governor weighed in, saying our project was nothing more than wolf propaganda, quote unquote, and should not be allowed to exist. Jamie and I were painfully aware that we were responsible for the lives of those wolves, and our ability to keep them safe seemed increasingly beyond our control. With all these concerns swirling around in my mind, I decided to go for a walk to sort things out. I was hoping Comets would join me. He was always the most inquisitive member of the pack, so I suspected he would follow if I walked alone into his domain. Normally, I would have set out carrying a camera and a tripod, but this time my mission wasn't to film, it was just to think. Sure enough, as I hiked uphill toward Williams Peak, Comets trotted along after me, although he followed at a dignified distance, pretending to be more interested in chipmunks rather than I was interested in chipmunks than what I was doing. As I walked, he would disappear into the trees, then reappear in front of me, only to disappear again. I got to a ridge overlooking the meadow where the pack often played. I could see the white canvas of our tents and a thin column of smoke rising from the wood stove inside our yurt. I sat down and Comets emerged from the forest. He solemnly walked over and sat down facing me. We had accomplished so much together. Comets, his pack mates, Jamie, and me. We were documenting the intimate family-oriented side of wolves that people had never seen before. A new audience was developing a more accurate understanding of these misunderstood creatures. We had to find a way to continue our work and, more importantly, protect the pack that had already given so much of itself. As I sat and wondered what to do, Comet seemed to be wondering about me. I had the habit of talking to myself when I was trying to sort out problems, and with each sound I made, he cocked his head. The light fur above his eyes knitted together as in an expression of curiosity and concern. Then, in a gesture I'd never seen before, he raised his paw up to me. I put out my hand and pressed it against his paw, and we sat there like that for a minute in silence. I felt as though he was assuring me that if we held up our end, he would hold up his. We should continue to deal with the human world, and in his calm, strong, confident way, he would keep his pack stable and safe. He was that kind of leader. That is the end of chapter 3.